outside the square. I want you to concentrate on the truth and the reality, not emotion. Okay? Now, when I ask questions, I don't want an answer. Okay? It would take too long and we just wouldn't get through it. So I've actually been, as Harry would tell you, I've got a really, really bad habit of talking too long. So I've got notes, which I hate, but I will use them to keep me on target. Okay, first things first. We've got something. Okay, this is essentially the structure I'm going to use. See, we don't need to know that. What we need to know is there are two words that come into play here. One is leader, and the other word is leadership. I often find they're almost interchangeable, when in reality they're not. And we'll be showing you that. A leader is a very generic label. So if you're a CEO or the captain of a team or whatever it is, you can be called a leader. It's sort of meaningless, really. It's just an additional word to make a high-up person feel good about themselves. Okay, so that's what leader is. Leadership, on the other hand, theoretically is something you've earned. You earned by showing people what a great person you are and what great ideas you have. But as I've underlined the word others up there, if I said I'm a great leader, that's my opinion. You have to decide who is the leader you want to follow and who is the leader you want to be. So it's completely different than leader. We can have leaders who don't necessarily have leadership qualities. Okay, so what does a leader look like? Everybody knows this man. This is the Donald, okay? Here's some questions. Is he a leader? Yes, he is. By virtue of who he is, President of the United States, he is a leader. Okay? As I said, put away your prejudices and think of this purely as factual. He's a leader, like it or not. And in fact, if we ask the other side of the question, do other people think he's worth following? Well, you know, raw numbers, 50% plus one, thought so. He's President of the United States. So somebody must have thought he's okay. So what are we saying? That everybody who is on his team, and in this case, the whole of the United States, or at least the voting population, which isn't always a lot, many of them don't bother to vote, are we saying that a leader is only a leader and only has leadership qualities if everybody in the team thinks so? So there's something to think about. Oops, why haven't we got a movement? There we go. This man, everybody knows who Nelson Mandela is. Okay, he was leader of South Africa. He's passed away. Was he a leader? Did he have leadership qualities? Yeah? Do you know what he was before he went to Robben Island, the prison? He was a terrorist. Wow. So what's my question? My question is, now from a personal point of view, I think he was the greatest man ever. I've got reasons for thinking that, but they're my personal reasons. He came out of a prison after many, many years where he was badly treated, and he forgave everyone. And he said, let's move forward. So to me, that was pretty good. But obviously, I've said, well, we can forgive him for being a terrorist. Is that fair? Is that reasonable? Think about that. I think we're going to have to use that to change the next one. Oh, boy. For people watching other than here, that's Malcolm Turnbull, our illustrious leader. Does he have Leadership qualities. I had dealings with him personally when I was a lobbyist. I have to say no. Now, on the same criteria, it's really interesting. Trump, elected by the people. Mandela, elected by the people. Turnbull, all our prime ministers are not elected by the people. People in this country often get really, really, really upset when we have a habit of sacking our prime ministers. When we get bored of them, we get rid of them. 1 year, oh. So we don't actually elect them. We elect a party, and the party elects that person. So it's a selection process that we really have no say in. But he's still a leader. He's still a leader. Now, have you taken everything away from me, Harry?
Hocking, then.
Oh, is it? Okay. The next one. For anybody who is shocked, easily leave the room. Okay. Everybody knows that person. Question. Was he a leader? Absolutely. Absolutely, he was a leader. He had, at the beginning, some pretty good leadership qualities. See if he fits my idea of leadership, political leadership. He was able to empathise with the people, knowing what's important to them. Now, for the history of World War II, we don't want to go into it, but after World War I, they took away the Sudetenland, they took away the coal and the manufacturing capabilities. So Germany was pretty bad by the time just before World War II came along. And this guy came along and he said, I know what you're going through. I know. And I know what the problem is. He was able to identify the problem, articulate it in a way that everybody said, yes, he does understand. And he was able to convey a positive message to them about, I can fix it. I can fix it. He was able to set out a plan to achieve those goals. And his message to everybody was, trust me. Trust me. And one of the other things he was really, really good at, if you've ever listened, I don't understand a word he says because I don't speak German. But if you watch him, he was a brilliant public speaker. Really, really good. He did it off the cuff. He was great. And he was able to get results. So clearly, he had leadership qualities. So where did everybody get it wrong? Would you have got it wrong? I think so. Because at the time, he didn't say, yeah, we're going to go out and we're going to manufacture war machines. He just said, we're going to manufacture things. You're all going to have jobs. And people accepted that. Where they made a mistake, at least in my view, is they didn't continue to ask a question. Do we want to continue to follow this guy? And as time progresses, you've got to ask that question because things change. So we'll get off Hitler because we don't want to. Harry, it's not working again. Doesn't want to work. You've frozen it, Harry. Okay, that's the list I gave to you. All right. So, leadership is about demonstrating your vision to others so that they want to follow you. But clearly, it's an ill-defined concept and it's subjective. What does that mean? What's what I said right back in the beginning is that leadership is something that you decide. I'm here lecturing you on leadership, So one presumes I must be, somebody's presumed I'm a leader. Self-accreditation. It's a word I came up with while I was doing this. I said, I think I'm a good leader. I know I'm a good leader. Who said so? I did. And when you ask me what makes you a good leader, I can rattle off half a dozen different reasons why I'm a good leader. And I'll tell you, those are the things that a good leader needs to have. But is that true? Is it true? Or have I just self-accredited myself? Which is what all really clever people do. They tell you, I'm really good. They're just self-accrediting themselves. Here we go again. Okay. Can someone be a leader without being anointed or selected? Football team, coach invariably selects the top athlete. Somebody thinks will be a leader. Is that necessarily true? Take this little example. We have an engineering firm. The bosses want to have a leader of that team. So they go out and they grab the best engineer and they say, okay, we want you to be the manager. We want you to lead all these other engineers. Does that sound reasonable? What have you done? You've removed the best engineer and you've made him a manager. 2 errors. One is, why would you remove the best person as an engineer and then have substandard people below? That's not real smart. Second thing is you've made an assumption that the best is also the best leader or manager. And that isn't necessarily so. I was the CEO of an organization doing stuff in mapping and remote sensing and GPS and all that sort of stuff. I had no qualifications in that. None. You know what my qualification was? Somebody asked me, what did I do? What was my job? I said, I'm a storyteller. I'm a storyteller. And it was true. Because I thought my industry was really cool. As most of you probably do when you pick your phone up and you start getting maps. Well, that's pretty cool stuff. And you can track things, you do all sorts of stuff. Well, if you're speaking to a politician, this might surprise you. They're not real bright, right? So they don't know the technical stuff. So you don't need a technician. You need somebody who's a good storyteller, somebody who can turn all this complicated stuff into something really interesting. And that was my job. Now, is leadership circumstance dependent? Okay. If I'm a good leader of a group of people in a sports team, if I go to another sports team, does it guarantee that I'm going to be a good leader? No. It depends on the team, depends on whether the team will like my style. So there's a lot of variables. So it's dependent on the circumstances around me. Are there common traits in leaders? Now, I thought a lot about that. And again, it always came back to the same thing. It says they're common. I've read many a book on leadership. They say, oh, the common traits of a leader are this, that, and the other. Again, I go back to the one before. It's circumstance dependent. Think about it. Ask yourself those questions. Don't let them slide by. We're back to having trouble again. Oh, we've lost it all. Okay. How are we going? We're not. So we've so far worked out that leadership is not clearly defined and it's circumstance dependent. Now, what else is leadership?
No.
Yeah, it's working again? Okay, work to the next one. Okay, all right. I said I wouldn't tell you. See, I lie. I told you I wouldn't tell you what makes a good leader. But I got a little trick here. There's 10. Have a look at them. I think I have those qualities. I think. Not you. I think. Number 2, I am a lousy listener. Always have been. Now I've convinced myself I've got an excuse. The way my brain works when I'm talking to somebody and they talk back to me, I take what they're saying and I think a couple of steps ahead. And I know I'm going to lose it if they keep talking, so I interrupt. Bad habit. Never got over it. So I'm not perfect. But what makes me a good leader? I know what my failing is. I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. So we can get rid of that one. And I'm going to add an 11th. Now, oops. Now, let's get to the next one. It worked. Okay. So if we take off one, the fact that I can't listen, and we put in this one. This one's really good. Does anybody know where that quote comes from? It's a very, very famous poem that clearly young people don't know anything about. It's a poem by a guy by the name of Rudyard Kipling. And it's called, very big name, If. If. Hence the if at the beginning. What that basically means is that if you're going to be a leader, you have to be able to deal with failure just as much as you have to be able to deal with success. He calls them imposters. Okay? So that's a pretty important statement. So I got now at number 1, be a good listener, be a doer. Now we go back to Donald Trump, all the terrible things we know about Donald Trump. Guess what? He's actually doing many of the things that he said he'd do. Fact of life, he is. Whether you like him or not, he's doing it. Does Malcolm Turnbull? No, he changes from day to day. Many politicians will change from day to day. Hitler did what he said. Turnbull, I'm not suggesting that Trump is going to be like Hitler, so don't panic. Okay? All right. Excite people. I like to think that when I used to speak to politicians and bureaucrats and other people about my old industry, I used to think, my big focus is to get them excited. I was telling somebody, Fazuki and somebody else earlier, about a situation where I wrote a submission to the New South Wales government on a very interesting subject, planning. And I had a look at who I was writing to, which a lot of lobbyists don't bother to do. I actually went and found out. There were 2 experts in planning, both former judges in the Land and Environment Court. So why would I tell them anything technical? Why would I tell them anything they already know? So I started to talk about some really exciting things, and I used emotive language. And I described the battle over land, you know, whether we can build houses there, whether we ruin the soil or the water and all of those sorts of things. And I called it the land wars. So I got their attention. And do you know the results of that paper were better than I could have ever dreamed. They almost entirely took everything I said and they actually went further. Now my board, when I showed them what I wrote, they laughed. They said, you're mad. Why would you do that? These are professional people. I'm a leader. I took an initiative. I said, what do I think I would like to know? I'm a curious people. I'm a curious person. I like to hire curious people. What does that mean? Well, if you're just run-of-the-mill, I really don't want to employ you. But if you're exciting, if you like to find things out, you don't want to just sit there and do your job, then you're the sort of person I need. And I believe that if I hire you, I can get the best from you. I was a coach of athletes. One athlete, extremely talented, and I did not give it to him. His mother and father had a lot to do with that. Unbelievably talented. Through some careful training, coaching, direction, and all of those sorts of things, took him from 260 something in the world to number one. Did I do that for him? No, he had the talent. I was a hopeless triple jumper. He was a triple jumper. I was hopeless at that. But I helped him to realize his full potential. So, you know, I've got a claim that that at least I can encourage people to achieve their goals. Following crowds. Now, leadership takes many forms. What bothers me about today, and you'd expect an old person like me to say that, what bothers me about today is that leaders are losing track of what their real role is. And they're taking us in all different directions. Companies are not thinking about their bottom line. They're not thinking about their people. They're starting to do exactly what the wider community is doing. And it's dividing us into little segments of hard done by people. And is that working out well? Well, Qantas did something really brilliant recently. They decided to manage the speech of their staff. You're not allowed to call somebody Mr. or Mrs. or he or she. So what does that do? Well, it gets all your staff very nervous because there are 260 something pronouns now. Can anybody name 260? I printed them out. I'm not going to read them out to you. Some of them are wacky. But we're creating problems for working as a team, because if I'm a good leader, what am I leading? I've got to lead a team, a cohesive group, people working together to achieve a common goal. And you can't do that if you start creating obstacles. And language is often an obstacle, whether it's because you don't speak English as well as I do. Some might argue with that. But whatever it is, we don't create obstacles. In a business, we focus on the bottom line. In a government agency, we would focus on outcomes that support something for the community. So we've got to focus on the end game. And where I worked, we implemented a system of governance. And it was invented by a husband and wife in America called Carver. And it's Carver Model of Corporate Governance. You can look it up. It's brilliant because it talks about ends. They call them ends policies. Where do I want to be at the end of what I'm doing? And those are the important things that we're losing sight of. And you as people need to keep asking questions. Whatever organisation you're in, if you think somebody is leading you down a rabbit hole, ask yourself, do I really want to follow this? Do I really want to follow this? Or can I find something else that will excite me, that'll make me happy about going to work every morning? Okay. This is a man I just read, Jordan B. Peterson. Very controversial. He tells the truth. And that is controversial today. Why I like that particular statement there. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday instead of someone else. That same athlete I was talking about went to the Moscow Games, and he was due to compete against a guy who had been the world's best triple jumper for decades. He was a fabulous competitor, but he was old. He wasn't as fast as my guy. He wasn't as good. But my guy just completely lost it because he was going in against his hero, and I can't compete against my hero. He also said something really funny to me. He called up on the phone. He said, I said, what went wrong? You lost. He said, well, it was raining. I said, oh, there's water on the run-up. I said, so it was only there for you. It wasn't there for anyone else. He said, well, it affects me more. What? These are the sorts of excuses people make when they start comparing themselves to others instead of comparing to yourself, trying to better yourself. And when you talk about leadership, are you people going to make the same mistake that the people of Germany made with Adolf Hitler? Or are you going to ask questions continuously? Is this person a good leader? Is this person taking us in the right direction? I don't think a lot of Americans who hate Donald Trump are doing that. There's an awful lot of energy goes into hate. Hate is one of the worst things you can do. Yeah, you disagree with someone. You don't like what they think. But hate is a big jump. And I watch it because I lived in America for 3 years when I was a kid. And I got a lot of friends there, and I watch them on Facebook and I say nothing. I do the Schultz, I say nothing because I don't want to upset them. I have a friendship based on other things other than politics, even though I'm a political animal. And I just despair at the lack of questions that are being asked. People are not saying, well, hang on, forget about Donald and all the terrible things he's done. Let's just see if he's doing what he promised to do. Hell, how many politicians do that? You know, I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm going to say, I think he's actually a reasonably good leader. Does he do everything right? Does a leader have to do everything right? Does a leader have to be the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow? Or can the leader grow? Well, with Hitler, we knew he didn't grow. He went downhill. So we know that leadership can go in all sorts of different directions. So it's time dependent. What do I mean by that? You start out here, you're a great leader. Over here, not so good. You've killed 8 million people. Okay? So it's also time dependent. And unless the people, that's all of you, have the good nous to ask questions all the way along, unless you are watching a leader, whether it's on a football team or not, whether it's leading the country, whether it's in a company, if you see that the organisation is going in the wrong direction, get out. You know, get out. You're making a mistake staying around. Now, since I've just told you not to ask me any questions, I'm going to say now, ask me any questions. And I may respond with a question. How am I going for time, Harry? Half an hour. Oh, all right. Well, we might even have to expand it a bit. I actually wrote some notes to expand it. Okay. So, a true leader is someone you want to follow. A true leader is an innovator. There's something. I haven't said that before. An innovator. Am I an innovator? Yeah. I'm trying this new method. That's innovative. I hope it works, because I did say to my son, he's actually watching this, I said, I'm either going to do really well, and this is going to go down well, or it's going to be a miserable flop. It's not a miserable flop, is it? So the thing about innovation is about trying things, trying new things. Inventors do it all the time. Was it Edison who invented the light? Famously, a reporter asked him, you made 10,000 mistakes. How did you keep going? He said, no. They were 10,000 learning experiences. And a very sort of a favourite management guru of mine is Tom Peters. And Tom Peters once said that the chances...
no, the question came from your son.
Oh, yeah, okay. My son's now sent me a question.
And he just said, should I tell him?
Smart Alec. He's in America, by the way. I'm going to see him in a week. Tom Peters once said that there are, to have a success in something, the odds against it are 10 million to 1 of having success. And I guess that Edison proved that. There's an awful lot of things you've got to fail at and get up and go again. So he said the chance of success are 10 million to 1. And the only way you're going to cut those odds is to make your mistakes faster. Right? But how many organisations do you think there are in this country who would let you make mistake after mistake after mistake? There are companies in the US that when you go for an interview, say to you, tell me the worst mistake you ever made. What's the biggest stuff up you ever made? And if you can't answer positively, they won't hire you. Because one of two things is true. One is you're lying. The second thing is, or you've never tried to do anything different. So, as a leader, you've got to risk failure. As an athlete, and I was an athlete, not just a coach, every time I stepped on the starting line, what was I doing? I was risking failure. That's the way to look at it, all right? I want to win, no doubt about it. But if I never stepped on that line, I guarantee you I wouldn't have failed. And I also stepped on that line believing I would win. Was I a great athlete? No, it's probably along the lines of most people. I was average. I won my share, I lost my share. But I always stepped on the line believing I would win. And I remember one time somebody said, well, you know, you won't beat this guy. He's the best in the world. He holds the world record. You're right down here. I said, yes, but if I'm racing him, I expect to win. He could fall over. He could tear a hammy. And everybody remember that ice skater from Australia? Yeah. He won because everybody fell over. It happens. And as a leader, you know that it could happen. And I remember my coach telling me something really, really profound. He said, if you believe that you can win, you might. If you don't believe that, you won't. So there's a big difference between might and won't. Won't is absolute. Might, yeah, they might all fall over. Never happened till Bradbury. They all fell over. He goes to public speaking events all the time now. He's famous. What can you talk about? I went in the race and they all fell over. So leadership is about taking risks. And I always like the idea of having stories around stuff I understand. And you should learn stories about your life that help you to understand. When my coach in America died not long ago, I had a dream to go and see him one more time. I was there in the 60s, so it had been 40, 50 years since I'd seen him. I got to see him. And he remembered me still. Just shows you what a shit of a kid I was. He still remembered me, and he remembered all the crazy things I did, which was great, crystal clear. But one thing that happened was I did get to see him, and I got to say something I forgot to say. Thank you. I hadn't said that to him. I left America. He was so powerful, so important in my life. I forgot to say thank you. So I got to say it. And then about a year or so later, he died. And I wrote a little bit of a eulogy and I put it on Facebook, and a lot of my friends, that's just what we wanted to say. And his daughter wrote back to me. And she was very grateful for what I'd written. And she said, I'll tell you something. When he was on his deathbed, me and my mum and so on were standing by him. And he talked about my visit on his deathbed. How cool is that? I finally found out he liked me. You know, it's funny. He was tough. He was a great leader because he knew my failures. He knew my failings. One of my failings was that if I won, I got a big head. I thought I was great. And he always brought me back down to earth because he'd bring me over. He'd say, what did you do wrong? I won. I got a trophy. I'm great. I said, what did you do wrong? So he brought me back down to earth. Leaders do that. Leaders tell you the truth. That's wacky. Dr. Jordan Peterson, go and read his book, 12 Rules of Life. He will tell you, tell truth. Leaders can tell the truth. Successful people can tell the truth. Many choose not to. Politicians don't. So leadership is also about who you are. If we go back to Nelson Mandela, why do I like him so much? Well, the fact that he came out of a really, really bad situation and he worked to build everybody into a team. Black, white, didn't matter. Colour didn't matter. What you'd done, evil things, let's talk about it. Let's tell each other what we did. Tell each other we recognise that wasn't a cool thing to do. And then let's move on. He brought a country together, and I thought nobody's going to bring that country together. Because there was another country I lived in for 4 years when I was young. And I know about apartheid. And I thought, there's no way he's going to bring that together. But he did. What a leader. But he was a terrorist. Do we forgive him that? Do you forgive him? So I think leadership is so many things. But ultimately, it's an individual thing. It's what we feel. Now that I think I've covered a little bit more, I can keep going, but I think we should ask some questions. I think we should. You should ask questions, and not my son. Not my son. My son is also does this sort of public speaking stuff. You can see it runs in the family. Anybody? Come on. Somebody put your hand up. Ask a tough question, and I'll give you a tougher one back. Come on, come on. We must have some. No, thank you. Give this girl extra points.
Thank you. My question is quite simple because I just wonder, in your opinion, whether you think Donald Trump is a good has a good, very good leadership?
That's a tough question. It deserves an answer. Do I believe it? When Donald Trump ran for president, I, like most people, said, no way will he ever get there. I made a big mistake. I was looking at a leader. Yeah, I don't like what I see, but I wasn't getting into the questions. I didn't have a look at his opposition and say, well, is she any good? So why it's important to ask questions is you can start to develop an idea. Now, there was a handful of people in this country who actually predicted he would win right back in the beginning. And people laughed at them. Why did he win? Could it be that he did exactly what Adolf Hitler did? He identified areas in the United States where there were problems. And people were worried. And nobody was talking about it. Hillary wasn't. Hillary didn't even go to see them because they'd always voted Democrat. So she didn't go to see them. So they heard the words of Donald, who said, I understand. It's a bit weird when this guy's a billionaire saying to a metal worker or a coal worker, I understand. But you can understand without actually being part of it. Remember what I said about when I used to speak to politicians and I wasn't a technician? Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's just having somebody say they understand. You know, he's got a past which is a bit, with women, a bit weird. But does that matter? Kennedy, most loved American president. He was a terrible womanizer. Terrible. There was another one. Clinton, I think, was his name. Nearly got impeached on being a womanizer. So let's not, we can then say, well, yeah, but Donald's worse because he did this or he did that. We don't know what he did. We don't know what Bill did. We don't know what Kennedy did. In truth, we've got, their stories. So, is it important what they did, or is it more important that they actually do what they say they're going to do? Sometimes I'm inclined. I remember when John Howard was in as Prime Minister. I think people even that didn't like Howard were prepared to follow him because you knew what he stood for. You mightn't have agreed with it at all, but he didn't flop around all over the place. He stuck to what he believed in. So, I'd like a leader who did that, a leader who said, this is what I believe. This is my commitment, and that's the way I'm going to go. The choice is yours to follow or not. And as a political leader, there isn't a country, except maybe North Korea, where everybody supports the leader. But in most cases, that's not the case. Right? That's not the case. So it's quite clear that a leader can represent less than 100% of the followers and be a good leader. Because I might say, I don't like Donald Trump. He's a creep and I don't like what he's doing. So therefore, I'm not going to follow him. Fine. Do you really think yelling that out at the top of your voice every single day of the week is going to make a difference? He doesn't care. He doesn't care. I shouldn't say this, but that's where Don and I are the same. And I've said that before here. If you're offended by anything I say, I don't care. And that's the wonderful thing about my age group. I came from an era where you took responsibility for yourself. And that's why I say I'm a great salesman for Jordan Peterson, because he's made some very obvious things about us as individuals. And one of the things, and my son who's listening now would love this because he's read it as well. Jordan Peterson's big thing, and they always talk about, apart from comparing us to lobsters, socially, he also says that his big one is about clean up your own room. Clean up your room, get it all sorted. That sounds terribly childish. But he then adds, you can't solve the problems of your family, of your community, let alone your country, if you can't even look after your own room. It seems a bit obvious, but how many people clean their own rooms? Is your room messy? You know, it's something that you need to think about is, what do I need to be a good leader? Clean up my own room. That's a good start. It's good. I guarantee you, if you read that book or you go online and see his 1001 videos, you will see how to live your life. It's brilliant stuff. Certainly worth a look, particularly males. Okay, who's next? Did I answer your question or did I make it worse? I'm not going to commit to loving Donald. And I don't wear his hat. Make Australia great again. Oh, no, it's America, isn't it? Yes. Okay, next question.
My name is Nabil. I wanted to ask you about Nelson Mandela. That what were the problems that South African people were going through that he, as a leader, ensured that those problems were over for them?
What were the problems they were going through? When I was there, that was in late 1959 into the early 60s. So there was racial segregation, very much what happened in America. Only a lot more violent, maybe not. There was a lot of violence. The whites dominated, absolutely. And, you know, if you were being unfair, a bit like Australia, now with all the talk about Aboriginal versus white Australians, what he did was he came along and he said, and it was at that time when the changeover, the clerk was prepared to let go of power and for the majority to vote and to elect their own president, which is how Mandela came to be. But what he said was we could go in and we could punish everybody who did something bad. Are we any better by doing that? Do we solve all the problems? No, because he also recognised that the white man brought with them a lot of good things. There's a great comedy group from back in the 60s and 70s. And there was a wonderful piece where a group of them were sitting around wearing turbans and things, and they were talking about the Romans. And it was John Cleese. You all know John Cleese? Okay. Have a look at it. Have a look up. John Cleese, what did the Romans ever do for us? And he's very angry. He says, what did the Romans ever do for us? One guy says, well, they introduced water, clean water, sewerage. And they start going through it. He says, yeah, well, okay, well, there's that, but what else? And he keeps going through. And thing after thing after thing, he comes up. Same in Australia. What did the white people ever do for us? I bet you didn't know that well before the white people got here, there is evidence that there was a drought that lasted for over 20 years in Australia. For those of you who have lived through a 10-year drought as I have, that was bad enough. But back then, 20 to 27 years, I think it was. Do you realise something like 1/3 of all Aboriginals died of starvation? Why? Because they were nomadic. They didn't get food and preserve it and save it for a rainy day. They didn't grow stuff, so they died. They had no modern medicine. They had no cars. They had no social services. They had none of that. So wherever you get bad things happening, good things happen. You know, that's something that we all need to be a bit clear on, is that what Mandela realised, and he had something to look at, right? You've heard of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a basket case. And what they did is they killed off as many white farmers as they could. They took all their stuff. But it was a tribal area, same as South Africa. You know, got Zulus and Bantus and so on, and they hate each other. Same in Zimbabwe. They weren't good farmers. They would grow food enough for themselves on a huge plot and nothing for anyone else. Zimbabwe, South Africa, they were called the food bowls of Africa because that's where the food used to come from. Now that Nelson's dead, the new leadership is trying to kill off the white farmers and take their land. Well, who's going to grow the food? Because that's not the way they work. That's not the way they think things should happen. So Nelson, I think, realised that. And so he saw it was much better if we could bring black and white South Africans together and have them working together to make a better country. Yes, admit the things you did wrong and then put it aside. Learn from your mistakes. All leaders do that. He did. He was great at that. You know, somebody asked me, who in the world would I have liked to meet? Only one man, Nelson Mandela. I couldn't have done what he did. I would have come out bitter and twisted, for sure. So I think, does that answer your question? Yes. Anybody else?
Yes. Hi, my name is Raj. My question is, are leaders born or they inherit the qualities as they grow up? And the second part of it is, what do you think of dynasty leadership? Dynasty leadership, like from one generation to
well,
the next.
if you believe in dynasty leadership, then you're believing that it's inherited, that it's in the blood. I think that's not true. I think there are certain, I think you can be a person who has an element of leadership in you when you're born, the way that you treat people, the personality and so on. But a lot of our personality is constructed over time anyway. The way we think is constructed over time. Circumstance dependent. Remember that? Time dependent, so we can grow into it. What was the first part of your question? Ah, yes, born or made. Born or made. Look, I'll give you another sporting analogy. My good friend, who is the triple jumper, he was definitely born that way. He was born with these wonderful attributes. But take this. I could be potentially the world's greatest sprinter. I could have all the attributes. If I never did any sprinting, because I never had any interest, I would never have realised it. If I didn't train properly, I may never have realised it. If I had an injury, I may never have realised it. So just being born with a skill set, whether it's physical or intellectual, still means you have to work on it. You have to build it. You have to do the right things to make it work. And in a leadership sense, the same thing applies. Take our friend in North Korea. Is he a good leader? He's a leader, but was he born one? Not really. He killed more people who were opposed to him, and therefore he was a leader. That's one thing you could do. If you go back, we all know that Hitler killed 8 million people. Mao and Stalin killed over 100 million. And they wiped out much of their own population, the intellectuals, the geniuses, the really top-notch people. So that's one way to get to be a leader. Kill off anybody who represents a threat to that. But other than that, I don't see how you could be born a leader. Can you think of something that says, yes, you can be born a leader? Hereditary, that doesn't make you a leader, because you'll usually find anybody going back to the days of the kings and so on. Yes, they were born to be leaders, but did they lead? Or did they simply eliminate anybody who represented a threat? I don't think that's leadership. Do you? What do you think? No? All right. Anyone else?
2 more questions.
Yep.
Hello.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Clara. So in my opinion, I think political leadership is quite different from leadership in other positions.
Yep.
Like I feel that political leadership or leaders, they often try to make popular or famous decisions.
Yep.
While like leadership in business, they will try to make profitable or right decisions for the company as a whole. So where do you see the link between political leadership and leadership in other areas?
Your description of the difference is brilliant. It's spot on. Except time has come into play and times have changed. And what we now have is companies not focusing on the profit. They're now going down all sorts of different rabbit holes. Now, if I was a cynic, I'd suggest that the focus on all the social norms of today, you know, the idea that women are treated worse than men, that there are these other disadvantaged groups and so on. If I was a cynic, I'd believe that a lot of companies and a lot of politicians are trying to distract us. Look at this. Don't look over here because we're doing something bad. That's a worry, because yes, a company should be focused on the bottom line. And yes, the politicians should be focused on us. But are they? At the moment, we have a competition going in this country between Liberal and Labor to see who can give the most money to someone else. Sounds fair? You all vote for whoever gives you the most. But have you ever stopped to ask, whose money is it? This will surprise you. Governments don't have any money. It's ours. And they're always happy to give away our money. That's always good. That's good leadership, isn't it? Give someone else's stuff away because they worked hard for it. Give it away. Yeah, I don't like that leadership. So, and I don't think companies that concentrate on things like, for example, take Qantas and this language control. What useful purpose is that serving? Are they saying that 100% of all employees in Qantas believe in this crazy construct of pronouns? Over 200, over 260, the last count, and growing. Now, how are you going to be, oh, God, I can't speak to this group of people because I don't know what to call them. It's getting difficult. It's not good for people to have to worry about offending somebody. That's what I said earlier. If I've offended you, I don't care. Get over it. Offence is very personal, and you can't legislate against offending somebody, because what offends you might not offend me. So it's a personal thing. You own it. You know, I've heard people say, I'm offended, I'm hurt. Who are you blaming? You see, if you are offended by something, you are responsible. You've accepted that. You've decided I'm going to be offended. Right? What Jordan Peterson says, we have to all accept that life is a little shitty. Right? What's it say? You you live life and then you die. That's it. And leadership and being part of things is all part of that. It's all part of, can you be a good leader if you don't think broadly? If you're the type of person who's offended by somebody's words, or I heard a wonderful person last night on Sky News, Rita Panahi, former Iranian, and she showed a letter that she received. Oh my goodness me. It was a shocker. See if you can find it online. It attacked her mercifully, called her terrible things. She's there. She says, I could take this guy to court. They said, yeah, but you don't know who did it. She said, no, he was really intelligent. He put his name and address on the back of the envelope. This is a woman who is fabulous. She tore into another lady there, and I thought, holy cow, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that. She is a very smart woman. Nothing offends her. She said, oh, I don't care. Water off a duck's back. You know, the people who really count, they don't call you those things. Right? So I think in answer to your question, I ask a question. What do you think? Do you have a different view? And why? Do you think companies now concentrate on the bottom line too much? You do? Fair enough. And you've got to learn to argue that point. You've got to look for answers, and don't, any of you, look for the answers in the same place, which is, what do I believe? And then find people who support that. Always go and look elsewhere. Get different opinions before you make one. That's a great leader. A leader who can stretch out, who can change depending on the information that's come to them. That it? There you go. Am I on time?
Very well.
You can come and ask me.
This is the last question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hi, Derek. My name is Phoebe. Thanks for the sharing. I have a small question for you're talking about the quality of a good leader. You mentioned about to be a good listener. So my question is how to be a good listener, and how do you tell somebody is a good listener and somebody is not?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'll give you a 30-second response, and I'm going to send you away to do something. Go and find videos of Jordan Peterson. All right? Jordan Peterson. He has the most incredible ability to listen. And I don't know how you spot a good listener. I always thought I was, till my sons told me I'm not.
If I could answer the question and I can ask the question, so it's probably I'm a good listener, but sometimes I just feel like socially awkward because I don't know what kind of question should I ask, and what question I ask make me know that silly. So that's what I consider.
Does it matter if you look silly?
Yes.
You know, I quickly, well, you don't have to record this. When I was in a job one time, they were changing from the old handwritten method of counting to a computer. They had big computers back then. And I knew quite a bit about computers at that stage, but a lot of the people, my peers, did not. And so we had these training sessions. And we're sitting there, and I'm looking at them, and I know they had a question. They had a question they weren't going to ask. So I did. At the end of it, a number of them came over and said, David, thank you for asking that question. I didn't want to look like an idiot. So you were happy for me to look like an idiot and I knew the answer. But that's, you know, I think you ask, don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed about anything. You know, Musashi from the Book of Five Rings has made the point that when you say something or when you do something, you think, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do it? It's finished. You can't change it. So move on. And people worry too much about feeling bad. The only one who has the right to do that at the moment is me, because I don't know whether you like what I'm said here today or not. And so it really doesn't matter. I'll survive. If everybody puts 0 for me, I'll survive. It doesn't matter. Harry just won't invite me back. Okay. If you want to ask any questions, we can talk outside.
The last question from your son.
Last question. Okay.
Very quick, so you can probably answer in one word.
Okay.
Who is better speaker at the public, you or me?
Me. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So now we're gonna start the next session. It's about work-life balance and sustainable, flexible work culture. Most of you guys can tell I'm from Japan, and my parents pretty much didn't have any work-life balance. My dad used to work until late nights. When I was a child, I didn't see him. So I call him dad, but I kind of saying to him, when are you gonna visit me next time? A bit sad. My mom also gave up a little bit of career because she's got my sister and me. Work-life balance, that's 20 years ago. But the work-life balance is relatively new concept. And because I know how my parents used to work and, having life, Australia has a relatively nice work-life balance. But we have a speaker from Rapid Context, Sarah. I think Sarah is it. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Do you need to stand up and stretch or get some? Stand up. I know that there's limited natural light and not a lot of oxygen. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I won't make you do any exercises. Yeah. So I'm Sam Comforts, and I'm the director of Rapid Context. And I thought before I hand over to Sarah, who will really do the hard work and give the whole presentation, I just spend a few minutes just talking a little bit about Rapid Context and who we are and what we do. And then Sarah will really talk about how we do it. So Rapid Context is 4 years old. I started the business off the back of an academic career, so mostly at ANU. I was there for about 10 years. As a lecturer and researcher, and I'd done increasingly a lot of work with government, and noticed that there was this thing called consulting that some academics did and seemed to earn a lot more money. So I was very interested in learning about this and really about doing things slightly differently. So really challenging the time frames that happened in academia, but also challenging the way management consulting worked. So I thought at times it was a little bit superficial. So I really wanted to bring the best of both of those worlds together. So one thing from being an academic is I'd never really had a 9-to-5 job, and I'd had 3 kids during my PhD in my early 20s. So I didn't really know any other way of working rather than flexibly. In fact, I kind of took it for granted. So when we started Rapid Context, that was sort of the basis, and that was my outlook. And the entire business was built upon the kind of necessity for me and then everyone else to have a really flexible way of doing the work, whether it was remotely or in hours that weren't sort of traditional hours. So what we do at Rapid Context is two key things. One is research and analysis on organisational culture, diversity and inclusion, lots of policy reviews and policy writing. So lots of organisations, so we do a lot for defence, a lot of male-dominated organisations. So the Australian Football League, Cricket Australia, the Federal Police, and we do basically qualitative and quantitative research to really find out the current state in organisations. And secondly, we give a lot of advice and education and training on the topics that we uncover, whether it's particularly sensitive or complex issues. But increasingly, we've been asked to provide advice and training on how we actually do what we do in terms of flexible work. And we do that in a number of ways. So I just wanted to give that kind of quick background, and happy to answer any questions in terms of the management of the business and what Sarah's going to talk about. But otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Sarah. And I should say, many people ask us how we have managed to be quite successful after 4 years and profitable. And often I do say it's because I have a Sarah who enables that, and is also my sister, which makes it particularly easy for me to tell her what to do. So, oh, you've got that. All right.
Thank you. So Harry asked us today to come and talk to you about work-life balance and flexibility. So are there any volunteers? What is work-life balance? What do you think it is? You're at an interesting part in your career. You've just, I think, freshly graduated or still in your final year. And so studying, lots going on. So there are these concepts about what work-life balance is. Common definitions in society and by the media, often LinkedIn or Facebook, will call it, it's about having it all. It's having time to work, having time to play, getting the most out of your life. But these common definitions forget a few things. There's the myth that work and life are separate. So have a look at these images. So much connection. We lead such interconnected lives, and that's our reality now, especially for the younger generations. The line between work and life is so blurred that it no longer exists anymore. We have watches that alert us and give us notifications. Lots take their their phones to the toilet. There's constantly funny clips about accidents that happen. There was another image I almost put up in America. They'd mocked up a texting lane to stop people bumping into each other. So you guys are faced with one of the toughest challenges. How will you disconnect? There's the second myth about work-life balance. And that's that there is an end point, that someday you will finally figure it out and you'll have achieved it. That there's this utopia. And that once you understand it, then you'll be set up for life. Does anyone here think that they've got work-life balance figured out? Is there anyone that feels stressed by it? Thanks, Sam. Is there anyone that feels stressed or overloaded, stretched? Sorry, I wish I was giving you the script for what it would look like. There's another myth that once you get it, that it's permanent. But really, work-life balance changes as you move throughout your careers, throughout the phases of your life. If you have children, if you're retiring, if you are studying, changing career paths, it's constantly changing. If only we did have the keys for success. So the reality is that although media is constantly pushing this idea that we will get work-life balance, is that Australia really struggles with it. There's stress rates. We're the third, We're the third lowest for the longest working hours in OECD countries. Here are some headlines that I got just this morning. That creating a work-life balance for financial professionals can be difficult to master. That Bub Desk helps mum get back work-life balance, like she had it to start with. So there's constantly this idea that we should be mastering it and getting it and achieving it, and really it's setting ourselves up for failure. A Google search, again, that I did this morning, how to get work-life balance in Australia. brought up results of over 10 million hits. 10 million results of people trying to tell us how to do it or questioning how to do it. So really no one has it sorted. So something that I'm quite passionate about is flexible work. I know, how can she do it? But that's a question we always ask ourselves. How can you work flexibly? So flexible work is really about moving away from that traditional 9 to 5 work structure that served us for generations. Put your hand up if your parent was a 9 to 5 worker or beyond 9 to 5. Yep. So what we're moving into is trying to figure out how we can use flexible work to work towards that utopia of work-life balance. So for rapid context, we define flexible work or flexibility as essentially the perception of control that an employee has over their work and their life. And research has shown that flexibility is the key ingredient in maximising your chances for work-life balance. But what do we actually mean when we talk about flexibility? Does anyone want to volunteer an answer? Well, these are some of the kinds of flexible work that people do. And they don't apply to all the same industries or all the same roles. Some of them are traditional approaches to flexibility. Some you might not have heard of before. It's common now for flexibility to be used as a business tool. And research has shown that millennials will now be seeking flexible work as an option. So when you're looking for that first job or you're looking for a job that meets your needs, you will be asking what kind of flexibility do they offer. Of course, there's all these benefits for individuals as well. The biggest one, of course, within Australia is using it to manage family needs. Again, so what are these assumptions versus the reality of what actually happens? Here are some of the common misunderstandings about flexible work. So enforced flexibility is when an organisation is asking you to flex for their benefit. So if you think of, a good example is emergency services, who need their workers to work shift work, otherwise they can't operate, for work health safety and other reasons, and to really be able to have that 24-hour service. So shift work in this situation is not flexible work. It benefits the company, not the individual. And in fact, we've done a little bit of work with emergency services, and they're talking about how they can flexibly deliver shift work. What can they do? And we're helping them think about it in a different way. So that's the employer-focused flexibility. Sorry, I should then talk about preferred. So preferred flexibility is when you're asking for flexible work. When you've realised it could be study, it could be that you want to travel, it could be a range of needs. So there's that employer-focused versus employee-focused. The next idea is that, next misunderstanding is that there's flexible work versus flexible workplaces. Has anyone heard of those two different terms used? So flexible work is really about, flexible work is when the output is the same, but the way we get there is different. So think about study. Output's the same, you get the degree. Some people can do it online, some people do it in person. It's the same for jobs. So flexible work, you might be able to do that 5th day at home. Whereas a flexible workplace is really what Rapid Context is about, and that enables and nurtures a flexible work mindset. Flexible work is not the exception, it is the norm. So at Rapid Context, everything about our company is flexible. every single person works flexibly. So when we're creating a project, designing it, it's all designed in the idea that it could be done anywhere, with the exception of client-facing things, although there's a lot of that we do via Zoom. The next common misunderstanding is that once you have it, you will know what to do with it. Oh, sorry, missed one. Flexible work versus low commitment. So a really dominant narrative that's throughout Australia and internationally is that you need to be at work. You need to be seen to be promoted, to get those great opportunities. And the big consulting firms can be really heavy on this. But research shows that this is untrue, and the hours at your desk or at the office are not a valid predictor of productivity or usefulness. So sometimes just because you're there, maybe you've worked till 9 o'clock, you'll get the odd jobs. You might not get the good jobs. And lastly, the misunderstanding that you will know what to do. So mainly people are seeking out work-life balance and flexibility when they've reached crisis point in their life, or when there's a big event. Maybe you're looking after your unwell family. Maybe you've had kids. Maybe you're studying. All of those different reasons, all of a sudden you need to work flexibly. And you get it. Your boss says, yep, you can do it, sign off on it. So what do you do next? Like no one teaches, often organisations are really facing this implementation gap, that they have created a policy, that they understand that their workers need to do it, but they're not teaching them how to do it. So it's great. You've gone from 5 days a week to 3 days. Maybe your workload hasn't shifted. Maybe your manager hasn't thought to change your workload. So there's really this space in organisations for training and mentoring and supporting those workers who want to work flexibly. And also about how to support a colleague if they're working flexibly. So where does it all fall apart? So when these things aren't implemented, when you don't get the support, when there's no one really shadowing you, you're not shadowing someone who's done it before, especially in Australia where it's not the norm yet. Sam, who is our CEO, she works flexibly. So we've got her to look up to help to give us the shortcuts. So really, miscommunication, mismanagement, and unsupportive. So let's go back to that example. You finally said, yes, I need to go part-time. I need to work from 7 till 1 a.m. instead of 9 to 5. How am I going to do it? You've moved on from this crisis. You've got the answer, and now you've got this utopia of flexible work to give you work-life balance. But slowly but surely, it goes wrong. So there's that overwhelming, it's almost like when you decide to take on too many subjects at uni. All of a sudden you're overloaded. You don't know which priority goes first. You're out of step. And you buckle under pressure. And lots of people ask, is it worth it? Was it worth cutting down? Was it worth bending myself inside out just to achieve this non-achievable work-life balance? So somehow, I'm very lucky, not just because she's my sister, but because I'm capable, to work for Rapid Context. And Harry really wanted me to come and talk about what it looks like for us. So I had a career before Rapid Context where I didn't get to work flexibly. I worked 9 to 5 and I did my master's after hours until I fell pregnant with my first child and managed to quickly finish those and move on to the next thing. So flexibility for Rapid Context means, well, I might give it, I can't remember if Sam talked about it, but we have an all-female workforce. We all work flexibly. Most of us have children or are studying. I work a 40-hour week and I've got 4 kids under 10 and I live in Pottsville, which is up near Byron Bay. We really utilise technology and we've figured out how it works to achieve high quality output. There's never compromise on getting the best practice done. I support the whole team from Pottsville. And this photo here, that's not her, that's one colleague with another colleague's daughter. So we have this set up in our office. Often people bring in their kids and it's done in such a respectful way. It's not a disruption and it's just the norm. People breastfeed in the office. We are only limited by our imagination at Rapid Context. If you think that there is something that we would need, then all you would have to do is ask Sam. And I should have put a photo in. We've got this really cool thing called the pod, and it's got a TV screen in it connected to, I think, is there games on it or Netflix? Lots of different things. Sam's got teenage kids, so she's got different needs that aren't matched by a little kitchen. 70% of the staff hold a higher degree, such as a master's or a PhD, and many had high-level careers before they moved into Rapid Context, but really reached that crisis point where they needed flexibility, maybe have paused where they were at in that company, and there was no space for them when they came back in. So they started looking elsewhere, and we were lucky to get them. This is us using Zoom, which is a favourite. So that's our conference room in the top corner, me in my home office. Tegan's zooming in from a car, and Catherine's in Melbourne. Not while driving. I think she was actually sitting in the passenger seat too, so she wasn't. No, that's okay. So how do we future-proof this? Flexibility is something we talk about all the time. I'm so passionate about getting it right, and I believe, like Sam, in having this workplace that allows people not just to work flexibly, but to do it meaningfully. No one wants to work flexibly and get the odd jobs. Like, we want to use these, especially these women, their brains are fantastic, their experience is fantastic. We have one woman who lives in Tasmania who is quite high up in a company, and her version of flexibility is working a few hours a week. But her few hours are more powerful than not having them. So how do we make it work? We create a culture of trust, respect, empowerment, underpinned by the notion that work-life balance is not an end state or one size fits all. There is no one that does the exact same version of flexible work. I've worked for Rapid Context for 4 years, and there's been not 1 year that's been the same. My youngest daughter is 4.5, and the way that I worked flexibly when she was born is nowhere near what I do now, when she can go to preschool and I can do it during the day. I was one of those people that used to work 7 till 1 a.m. And I must say that that's not because Sam was asking me to do it or because of the company needs, it's because that's what I wanted to do. So how do we sustain a flexible workplace? Well, we have a flexible workplace, not just flexible work. We empower staff to find the work style that fits, and this is across location and hours of their work. We have a staff member that lives in the US, one that lives in Perth, Tasmania, I think south side of Sydney, Melbourne. We believe that flexible work styles are ever changing, and what works this year probably won't work next year. Sometimes it's what works this week won't work next week. Not won't work next week, especially those that have little kids. We have open and ongoing communication with all staff about their needs and wants to ensure they're engaging in meaningful work that enables them to thrive. We give them the right support and tools to enable them to thrive in their choices. We try to make it easy for people to do the right thing. We're constantly evaluating the tools that we have and making sure that they work. If they don't work, we want to know. We implement an employee-centred view to project and task management. And we acknowledge and verbalise when things don't work. And often when we have employees come across from highly structured companies and organisations, it takes a while for them to figure out how can it possibly work, but it does. So here are some tips on optimising a flexible approach to work. Have a communication plan. So this is really based if you are working from home, working from a hot desk in another location. Have a communication plan. You need to maintain an open line of communication with your workplace. Having productive emails, just not email overload. Make the most of meetings. Use tools such as Zoom and get colleagues who might be in the meeting to send you anything you might have missed. Also have a backup in case the internet breaks down. Have an app on your phone or something. Get a good task manager app. To do it, to-do list and reminders are the backbone of any multitasking individual. Often when you work flexibly, you are multitasking at weird times. I might be in the car, in the pickup zone at picking my kids up from school. Some might be, I know one of our colleagues, Emma, does cycling, and she has responded to emails from the side of a mountain, which there was no pressure for her to do that, by the way. She's just very keen. Have a system for email management. Sam had a week where she was getting emails almost every 90 seconds. So you have to think about how you're going to sort through that, because that can be your undoing. If you work 2 days a week and you come back and have 1,000 emails to get through, how are you going to stay on top of it? How are you going to feel like you're not out of the loop? And that's that disconnecting. If you work from home, you need to have clear boundaries when you're in work mode. For me, I talk a lot about, 4 kids, lots of chatter, especially on school holidays. I get lots of notes shoved under my closed door from my 4-year-old asking for things. Work time is sacred, and that's different from number 6. Time marches forward regardless of distractions, and deadlines can be unforgiving. At Rapid Context, we're really respectful of other people's time. So if you sit down in front of your computer and get distracted on something else, you check an email and all of a sudden you've moved so far from the task and you've lost your hour. And lastly, you need to acknowledge when it's not working. We have, for the first time ever, I have looked for some hot desking around Pottsville. Pottsville's very small. There's not a whole lot of hot desking around. You might have to go to Byron or some other ideal scenario out there. And reaching out to colleagues who do it. Recognise who else in the workplace has done something a bit similar to you and asking how they make it work. And there's just some further resources to leave up there for those that are interested. So are there any questions? Yeah, I can email this to you. I'll email it to Harry. So while you're running over there, I don't want to give the illusion that it's easy. Flexible work's not easy. Managing a group of flexible workers can be really challenging. They've all got really different problems. But I'm so passionate about getting it work. I value what they offer the business. I want them to feel successful. And that's what often I ask. I even asked Sam the other week, what makes her feel successful at the end of the day? What makes her excited and passionate to get to work? And we really care about that. We value that they've got time set aside to work.
So thanks, Sarah. So
sorry, I zoomed through that. When I get passionate, I talk very quickly.
Yeah, so my question is, how far are we from 100% flexible work? Within Australia, we're a long way from it being embedded. So Australia recognises, probably I think it was in 2014, that's at a guess, the Fair Work Act came into play about that employees have the right to request flexible work. And so quickly, lots of these large organisations put together policies that enable you to go and ask for flexible work. But what they didn't do was that next step, which was training managers and supervisors and team leaders and HR to deal with those requests without it disrupting the whole organisation. So we're moving into that phase now where it's about finding the right training, the right approach, the right infrastructure to enable it to happen. And what's so difficult is that while that, you often we often call them the dinosaurs, but that the group of men who are largely in senior management, who have that dominant way of thinking that is not necessarily open to gender equity and flexible work modes, which ironically research shows that in the next 10 years, all of those senior people will be going into retirement, and no one wants to retire in the old-fashioned way, which was you get to the point and you retire. They want to transition out and have to use flexible work, which is what they've been pushing against so hard. So there's a little bit of satisfaction for me in that. But so within Australia, until we have training and until we are really there's enabling managers to manage it properly, then there's lots of employees who won't see the full benefit, which is why I listened to a speech the other day on someone who had done research into millennials, this big research study, and that what that showed is, as a generation, you guys are seeking flexible work. You're seeking positions that offer flexible work. And so that's forcing companies to review what they're doing. But until they can move past policies and make them realistic and usable and easy to embrace, then unfortunately we're kind of stuck.
Can we say 5 years or 10 years? Because really, this whole concept of the bring together and Sarah is really looking for the future. And really, I want to kind of, even though, you know, it can't be just a personal opinion, 5 years, 10 years, but we want to see some sort of prediction.
I would say 10 to 20 years. Yeah, 20 years. If in 20 years we're not, I would be surprised if it wasn't, if at least we hadn't moved beyond managers having an understanding and that it was more about the whole system. But it's difficult to rush. We want to get it right. We want it to be the best practice. And that's why it's becoming unstuck, is because they've rushed to get these policies in place that don't make sense, and because they don't make sense and because managers aren't using them, there's this constant, no one's using it because they're scared that they might get disadvantaged or seen as a, you know, not a good employee. Sorry. Maybe I'll come back in 5 years and be like, yay, we got it.
Yeah, I have a question, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So my question was, what do you think is the single most biggest challenge to flexible workplace?
To a flexible workplace? I would say the biggest disruptor to a flexible workplace is having an employee who doesn't support it. And it's that undermining of the core value. So it's really about having a common understanding across the whole workplace and being able to, because it comes through in all of your interactions with your colleagues. It's being respectful and appreciating that we all have that different approach to work. And also acknowledging that the reason, like when we're not working, we've got a good reason for not working. Yeah. Sorry, did that answer your question? Kind of. Sam, would you have a different?
I think it's, it's attitude.
Yeah. And we're quite different at Rapid Context, that we have a flat structure, whereas bigger companies have a very pyramid. There's someone at the top and that hierarchy, whereas we're very flat and value everyone's voice. So it's different in those hierarchies where there's many, many different levels for undermining. And yeah, I mean, the CEO of a company might love the idea, but by the time you filter it down to the bottom and that lower level manager who's like, you know, and it fails.
Hi. So I'm interested in when you have kind of enforced flexibility, how would you manage the work-life balance, especially when you have child and family who has different flexibility compared with you?
So when it's enforced flexibility, often there's a continuum of flexibility that you'll move along in your life. And when you start your career, often in a company where it's that enforced flexibility, especially if it's shift work or if it's that expectation that there's really no off time. And for graduates, that can be a problem. Often, you know, I've heard of some companies that there is, you know, they bring in 200 new graduates and there's 5 positions at the end of it. So the expectation or that unconscious message is that you better work hard, you better prove to us that you are better than the 195 others. And so that's another kind of enforced flexibility that benefits the company because they're expecting you to flex towards them to work late, to do all of that. So the question was, how would you deal with that?
How would you manage that, especially when you have child and other family members who doesn't have the same flexibility with you?
It's difficult. And that's why so many of these companies have such high turnover of especially women when they get to that stage where they've got families, where they have so many pressures that they are dealing with. It always starts with communication and seeing what the company has to offer, grabbing out the terrible policy, and seeing what they can do, asking other females who are in that company what they have done, asking, there's nothing wrong with asking males. I've got other, I spoke to someone within, I think it was within Air Force, and she said her best manager was a male, and he really helped her plan out her career. So communication, asking, and then quite often when you get to that stage in your life, you'll be seeking positions that offer flexibility. If they don't, unfortunately, a lot of companies though, it's a hard line, we don't offer it. And that's where it comes down to roles and industry. But interestingly enough, not all employees within industries want the same kind of flexibility. And it really depends on the phase of your life, and figuring out what's right for you. Like, what's your bottom line? What are you happy to go between? Is it that you just want to work 3 days? Is it that you've come up with this solution where you'll do emailing for 2 hours in the morning, come into work? Or is it that you're going to work from home? And just seeing what the company's open to. I mean, you look at Google or Virgin or those companies that are so ahead of the field with what they will offer. All comes down to the size of the organisation that you work with, and convincing them that you can do it. And then emailing me and saying, they won't let me do it. How can I help?
From the presentation, I just understood that Australia falls under bottom 3 in terms of work and life balance. I'm just curious to know what could be the standard for saying like work and life has to be balanced. Like in the investing companies, like lenders, they usually look for the debt equity ratio, like 1:2. Is there some kind of standard for work to life balance?
Sorry, what was the last bit?
Is there any standard for work and life balance?
The standard is working, if you're working full time, it's that you shouldn't be working over 40 hours a week, but Australia tends to work 50 plus hours. And lots of it is invisible. Yeah, so that's the standard. So 50 hours, or 40, about, I think it's 38 hours is meant to be the norm of a full-time job. But most are, yeah, they like to work long hours. Sam, is there anything else you'd like to add to that? Any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
Thank you very much for Rapid Context to giving such a beautiful presentation. I'm Sanjay Katani. My question is, we are here a lot of students, and then some of them are just graduate as well. So what's your suggestion? Like what sort of job we have to search? Like there's a lot of way to do like casual, part-time, and then full-time as well. So what is your suggestion for us?
Your solution for your careers?
Yeah, like me and like other students as well.
I think it's such a personal preference. What suits this table isn't going to suit this table, and what suits you isn't going to suit this woman here. So for your industry, it's about figuring out what your bottom line is. What works for flexibility? I can't really speak for IT and accounting, especially in the graduate phase, but I've got many people in those industries who have their own businesses, who work from home, who have built their own offices to make it work for them.
I believe we are from the accounting and business background.
Yeah.
So if your answer is related to accounting and business, that would be great.
Yeah, I can look into it. The only other thing that we forgot to mention is that that Harry and his team have been hugely helpful in helping us work flexibly. One of the biggest problems that we found is that we couldn't find a payroll system that allowed us to enter in flexible work hours. that it would constantly default back to that 9 to 5 system. And one thing that we offer staff is unlimited paid leave, and it would not allow that. The system would not accept it. And Harry worked closely with Sam to figure out, to build a system that would work that.
Yeah, I think it was almost actually the attitude about previous, almost like actually the bookkeeping company. They did not, they actually, it was really hard work to get, we said, no, we've got unlimited paid leave, we don't worry about this, we don't worry about that, and they just kind of couldn't really deal with it, like, because it was so unstructured in a way. And, you know, and even I think, you know, tracking hours, and that's been, as a small business, that's been something we've certainly, as we've grown, had to, I don't know, it's been a steep learning curve, but, you know, the beauty of having your own business and being small is that you can question everything. We can, and luckily we are a group of, you know, very highly qualified and educated people who write policies for a living. So every policy we have absolutely researched what is sort of international best practice. We have written all of our policies collaboratively as a team. And a lot of it, even as a sort of director of the company, I realised how much it takes for me to, like that communication. So to have that kind of lead policy, unless I am, like people really want to be a part of the business, like so, you know, when they want to be a part of the business and feel really committed, then they won't use that kind of policy. So then it's really up to me to continue to foster the kind of organisational culture where people want to stay. So that's kind of my, you know, that bit of responsibility. But yeah, those systems, our IT systems, all of that are what, you know, for some people I think you just think, you know, it's too hard. I want an off-the-shelf project management software or yeah, payroll or whatever. Yeah, it just wasn't going to work. So yeah, that's been fun. But yeah, thank you.
And the other thing I was going to say, sorry, lastly, is my biggest piece, but one of my pieces of advice for you is don't disregard life experiences. We work with all of these women who have amazing degrees, PhDs, masters, but that's not the full picture of them. And we see that as part of them, but it's their experience that sits on top of that, and seeing the whole person. We don't just see Sam as someone who is our boss. We see her with her kids. We see the things that happen outside of life, outside of work, sorry. And we want her to bring all of that. And that's the same across all the staff. If it means they need to bring their kids to work, so be it. If they're happy with it, we're happy with it. Yeah, so don't disregard other people's life skills, life experience, just because they might not have had the same career pathways as you. I have no doubt that everyone in this room will have leadership roles, whether you're a team leader, a supervisor, maybe you'll end up being a CEO of your own company. The qualification is really important, but that's the starting point. It won't just stand alone.
Thank you. And I think just one more thing to add. I guess for a lot of students looking for work, I really like what Sarah just said. Be yourself. Don't write a CV for us. Write a CV like a storyteller, just like the previous speakers.
Yeah.
About your life, about your skills, about your families, about where you come from, and we want to hear it. We want to see who you are, not you telling us what we want to see, right? So,
yeah.
Thanks, Sarah and Sam. Thank you.
No worries.
So that's the end of the fourth session. Unfortunately, we don't have the paper for this session, but we will have paper for the next session. So we're gonna start the afternoon tea. We're gonna start the next session, which is about Power BI, whether you had or not. But it's fine. We're gonna show you how it works anyway. So next session gonna start at 3:30. So you have like 40 minutes to have a break. Thank you.